Thank you, Shannon, and thanks everyone for joining us today, whether you're watching live or catching this recorded after the fact. My name is Michael Clark. I'm Immediate Past President at the Conference of Consulting Actuaries and Managing Director at River Mercantile based out of Denver, Colorado. I've got the pleasure today of being joined by Gloria Asare, who is the Toronto affiliate leader of the International Association of Black Actuaries. She's also a friend of the board, which is a liaison between the board and the membership. In her day job, she is head of pricing for Canada at AXA XL. She is a fellow of the Casualty Actuarial Society, an associate of the Canadian Institute of Actuaries, and a member of the American Academy of Actuaries. Gloria, thanks for taking some time and joining us today.
Thanks very much for having me, Michael.
So first off, Gloria, I want to talk a little bit more about the International Association of Black Actuaries. For those that might not be familiar with the IABA, can you tell us a little bit about the organization, including its mission and goals?
Sure, definitely. So I think one thing that arises a lot in our profession is that many people think that because we have exams are the great equalizer. What possible DE&I issues could you have? All you need to do is take exams, pass them, and you'll get your fellowship and be on to bigger and better things from there. However, that really doesn't consider the reality that a lot of diverse groups face. There are several barriers to entry, even quickly thinking about exams, for instance. Today, getting even an internship in your junior year without any exams is almost impossible. A lot of my diverse candidates don't hear about the profession sometimes until they've graduated university and already started their first job. So that's why the purpose of the International Association of Black Actuaries is really to be a support organization for Black actuaries, whether you're an aspiring actuary looking to enter the field to begin with, or even if you are a fully credentialed actuary looking to just grow in your career. We're all about different means of providing support to help our members do that.
Oh, that's great. And one of the things that has come up in conversations I've had with others that are involved with IABA, along with the Organization for Latino Actuaries, it seems like maybe some of the biggest barriers to entry are just people being unaware of the profession until it becomes maybe harder to get in with, like you mentioned, with having an exam to be able to get an internship, which then turns into a full-time job. With a lot of that front-end work, it seems like where a lot of focus and time and attention need to go. And we'll get into some of the things that IABA is doing to address that. But how did you become involved with IABA?
Believe it or not, it actually wasn't too long ago. I wish I got involved sooner. I actually attended the first annual meeting I attended was in 2018, that summer in Atlanta. And that was my first time meeting a whole group of other Black actuaries, members of the IABA, participating in their conferences. It was really my introduction. So I'm really grateful that my company sponsored me to attend it, because as soon as I set foot there and I saw other people that looked like me, other people that had gone through similar challenges as me, and I was hearing about all this research that the IABA has done in partnership with the SOA, the CAS, regarding issues of diversity that I immediately related to. I was like, this is amazing. We need, like, Toronto needs this. At the time I was in Toronto. So I just connected with the executive director and the president at the time, Tanisha Magruder, to say, I think we need something in Toronto. I'd be interested in setting it up. What are some next steps for how we can go about this?
Talk for a minute about what that was like going to that first IABA annual meeting. You mentioned just being able to see people that looked like you. I mean, what kind of an effect did that have on you?
It was somewhat nostalgic in some way, because I actually grew up in Kenya. So I grew up with Kenya, which is in East Africa. So I grew up in a place where I was not used to being a minority by any means. And so this was actually the first time I ever had that feeling again since 2006 when I left Kenya. so it was just amazing to to learn about people who are from either different parts of Africa or different parts of the Caribbean or North America, but all have some shared experiences, whether it's shared experiences with racism or some of these barriers that we were talking about in terms of entering the field. Um, I think I relate with a lot of the Iaba members in that I am one of the few Black actuaries in my workspace. I think that's the case for many different people as well, especially thinking about the statistic that even in the United States, even though Black people make up around 13% of the population, we're only around 1% of actuaries. So just that feeling of people you can immediately relate to, given the everyday thing that work that it makes up your life. It was just really phenomenal. It was really amazing. I obviously, I highly recommend AIBA to everyone. I guess an
Uh,
important thing to point out, though, is that AIBA is not just for Black members only. Anyone who supports our mission is welcome to attend. So even the annual meeting has many different representatives at all different levels of different organizations participating.
and I appreciate you bringing that up. And just as an example, I'm a member of IABA, and I'm clearly not a Black actuary,
Clearly.
but it is a great way to. But it is a great way to support the organization, right, and be able to stay in touch with what's going on there. You talked about some of the shared experiences of meeting with some of these other Black actuaries at that meeting. Any of those that you could share with us in terms of the things that you would compare notes on?
Sure. I have to take take a minute to think about it because that was 2018. I also attended the 2019, and since then we've been virtual. But I would say just being able to talk about even like similar foods that you eat or things that you miss from your home from when you were back home, to think about your experience entering the profession. Like, for instance, in my case, I didn't pass my first actuarial exam until I was in my senior year, and I was really behind the curve in that sense because I only really the university I was in, I only really began the actuarial concentration in my junior year. Having thought that I was so behind, I met so many other members where they only entered the profession after graduating college, and hearing about those challenges, studying on your own, the pressure to pass. In a lot of cases, people like us were lucky that we passed some of those preliminary exams on our first or second try. Otherwise, it never would have happened for us. So kind of talking about some of kind of like the pressures for work and realizing that you're not necessarily alone in how you feel, because sometimes you compare yourself to your colleagues and you're like, oh, they came in with 3 or 4 exams, or I feel so behind at work, or whatever it is. Having other people that have gone through similar things and just being able to talk about that and see you're not the only one is just really, really helpful.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Another thing that I'm curious, and I'm totally going off script from what you and I had prepared here, but so I apologize. But one interesting thing that I think I've come to a better appreciation of over the last couple of years in talking with other Black actuaries is that even within the Black actuary community, there can be pretty substantial differences. So you, as an example, you mentioned that you grew up in Kenya and you came to the U.S. presumably for university.
Yep.
And I've known other actuaries that came from Africa as well, came here to study, came upon the actuarial profession, but they already had that mindset of they were going to look for a profession, and how that compares maybe to someone that's a homegrown in the U.S. or Canada and their experience. Any thoughts that you have, especially in thinking about IABA and some of the mission and goals? What are the differences between those two groups, and what should people understand about those differences?
I'm happy we went off script because this is such an important thing to talk about that we hadn't brought up earlier. There is a huge difference, and that is something that IABA tries to consider in our goals, tries to consider in our objectives. We have, like, even I mentioned earlier that only around 1% of actuaries in the US are Black. And a large portion of that demographic are actually international. And then, of course, looking at people's histories, whether if you did grow up in the US and Canada, you have a very different relationship with racism. You probably have people in your family, whether it's your parents, your grandparents, and even going much further back, who have experienced it. And that leads to this culture and like even an additional mental barrier on you as to, can I achieve this? Can I move forward on this? Can I really be a successful actuary? You might be the first person in your family to go to university. And then you compare that to, and don't get me wrong, definitely international student, I refer to them as like internationals, whether from the Caribbean or from Africa, definitely have their own set of challenges that have a psychological impact. But a lot of times in from my experience, when you are international looking to move to the US and Canada, you're very high achieving. Maybe you came from a high achieving family. Your family, for a lot of people, have told you, go ahead and do it. Once you get to America, do your best, focus on your exams. You can do it. There's this belief that if you work hard, you can make it. And so Iaba is interesting because we have diversity within us as Black people. Our members have different relationships with racism. The thing that definitely does unite us all is that regardless of whether you grew up not as a minority like I did, or whether you've always grown up in the US and Canada as a minority, once you're here, you experience racism. That is without a doubt a fact, and that's something that ties us. A lot of times when you're on the street, when you're in the bus, when you're in the elevator at work, people don't ask you, hey, so where are you from, so that I can decide whether I'm going to be racist to you to some extent or not. There's nothing like that. People look at you here and you're Black. And so because of that, despite our backgrounds, we definitely have some sort of shared experience with racism, even if it's to varying extents. I actually wrote an article for the CAS Future Fellows last year, which was speaking about, like, from an actuary's perspective to fellow actuaries, what are some examples of racism in the workplace and what can we do to combat it. And it was also an article written on the IABA's behalf, but it definitely got to the fact that this was not just one person's opinion. This is a group's opinion on the IABA's behalf, given how different our members are.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. In fact, we'd love to get that link from that article that you referenced there, so we can distribute that when we distribute the recordings of this interview as well. So
Sure.
hopefully that'll be available for those that want to read that.